Hello, welcome everyone. Another live stream here looking at these altcoin charts. They are popping, things are strong. The alts are leading the way up, which is always very nice, what we like to see around here. So we are going to take a look at the charts, and I'm also going to talk about some particular strategies that are working very well right now that I like to use. They're simple, but I will go over that, share some of that with you guys. And of course, any charts you want to look at, we will take a look at those. Martin joining us here. Let's give it a minute or two. Let some other folks join us here. I will be posting the links for everybody else here shortly. So what I have on the screen here is Litecoin. Let's take a quick look at Bitcoin here first, and then we'll look at some of the other names that are both the leaders on the way up, as well as some names that are going to start playing catch up, I believe, and some of them have already started to move out of range, and I think that's really the next phase of this move is some of those laggards ideally will start to join the party and get going here. Hey, long time listener since 2017, man. I gotta admit that feels like a lifetime ago. It's true what they say about aging in crypto. But looking at Bitcoin here, so let's take a look at this one here first, and then we will take a look at some of these alts that are moving here. But here is BTC on Bitstamp. This is just going to be a little bit cleaner because I have some of my other charts marked up. But let me clear these lines here. And there, and we can see that the trend continues. Now yesterday I did post a video about some of the consolidation that was underway, and to be fair, I was saying, hey, I'm slightly leaning bearish. I was looking for a little bit more of a pullback. We didn't get that, and then of course the level that I was really watching yesterday was that 8,800 level. I said if we can start closing above 8,800, that's the level that's going to be taken out to start looking for the next leg up. And yesterday in the evening, my time, I did see that pop. I had some alerts set, and I saw it push here on this particular candle, pulled right back in, but it's still held 8,700. And then of course that was the good breakout point. At that point, went pretty much straight to 9K. Now 9K was my first kind of big target. I wouldn't say my ultimate target, but it kind of really was my second target there on this move. The first one was 8,600, which clearly we saw happen there, and then the second target was 9K. And the big question is, is this going to continue? Where do we go from here? Or is this, due for a little bit more of a pause, more of a breather? I think Bitcoin is due for a breather, but the better opportunity continues to be the alts, and so that's where I'm spending most of my effort, is looking at some of those alts and trading some of their still long some Bitcoin here, especially with this continuing to move out of range and taking out to that $8,800 level, which we saw, and we saw a little bit of a pullback here to that, right? We saw this 8,800 level taken out, went straight to 9K, price pulled right back and almost looked like it was a fake out move. And there was a lot of volume here at the top, right at 9K. It looks like some profit taking, maybe some short sellers piling in there. But it did pull back, held that 10 EMA almost perfectly on that daily time frame. And we're starting to see this, or on the 4-hour, excuse me. And we're starting to see this pop right back above that 8,800 pretty quickly there. So far, the bulls remain in control. The sellers are nowhere to be found just yet. You're seeing some rotation into some of the smaller cap names that are starting to catch up a little bit here, some of the laggards, but the strongest names that we've seen here as of late remain some of the strongest still, which we'll look at right here shortly. But all in all, that's going to be the interesting thing that happens over the weekend, is where does Bitcoin do here? We might even see it during this stream. I mean, it's only what, $60 away to 9K, so maybe we finally take out that 9K, pop right over that level. But just keep in mind the big picture, and I mentioned this in a little bit more depth in my video yesterday where I was talking about this longer term chart that I'm watching. The specific numbers, it never has to be exact. It doesn't have to go exactly to 9K or exactly to 9,100. You know, it's a little bit more of a range. And at the end of the day, really, I'm looking at price action, right? I'm looking at what's the volume, how's it go, and does it hold? Do you see a lot of distribution near the highs? Does it start to get choppy and pull back, right? That's kind of what I'm looking for. Or the pullback's mild, lower volume, and the way up is stronger, which so far that's been the case. But this is an interesting level here. It's also a fib retracement level. And if we look at the wick here from October to the wick low here that we saw in December, there's a blue hash line going across there. That's the 618 retracement level. So it's just kind of an important inflection point in terms of price resistance that is worth noting, worth keeping an eye on here. You know, so far the trend is your friend. The price continues to move higher. We did see a few days of pause again and seeing another bit of a breakout here. Looking at the trading bot status here on the Node Insider site, the 4-hour remains long as the daily, and so for now those things are positive here. The BMI ratings are still in the positive. So all in all, nothing really to complain about. The trend is your friend. The bull remains in place, and the altcoin market continues to really show some life here, which is very nice for a change. I mean, it's been a while since we've seen, you know, the alts moving in tandem with Bitcoin, and it's kind of nice. It's a little bit refreshing to see that, hey, Bitcoin's going up and the alts are outperforming, or even in some cases leading the way up here. So very nice to see, all around good action. But speaking of the alts, let's go look at some of those, because that's really the big story here that we've seen as of late here. I'm going to go to the BTC pairs, because that's how I like to look at that, but we'll look at the USD pairs. First, looking at the BTC dominance chart, continues to drip lower, coming off the highs here. Again, this is not a chart that I really do a lot of technical analysis on, to be honest with you. I prefer to look at the individual names and some of that stuff, like the total market cap dominance and total market cap chart. I don't generally chart them a whole lot or do TA, but I do keep an eye on the major trends. And Bitcoin dominance has been rising for the last year and a half, and finally peaked around this 72, 73 mark, which is incredibly high when you think about where it came from in the low 30s. And so it has had quite the retracement, even as the price has come down, which means the alts were just bludgeoned and killed over the last 2 years. And I'm thinking we're finally going to see the BTC dominance top out. Doesn't mean price is going to top out, but the BTC dominance may, and some of these alts have a little bit of a resurgence, as we're starting to see here. So all in all, good stuff from that perspective. Let's go look at some of these alts here. I'm going to start with some of the recent leaders, some of the big cap names. Stellar Lumens playing some big catch up here today. Zcash continues to be a strong name, has been on the trending list for some time. Same thing with Ethereum Classic, has been on here for the last couple of weeks. Monero still on the list. Link looking really good here. And so a lot of those names that were setting up some breakouts and some potential pullback entries have all continued to follow suit to the upside. So good stuff here. I'm going to go over the big cap names quickly, and then what I'm going to do is take a little pause and explain a little around some strategies that I like to use right now, and they're going to predominantly be based on lower time frames. And so with the market moving so strongly right now, I'm liking the 1 hour and the 4 hour time frames as my primary trading time frames. The daily chart, of course, I take a look at that. You got to look at what's the broader tide, what are some major resistance levels or potential targets to be watching. But in terms of my entry points and my tactics and kind of scaling in and out, I like to look at the 4 hour predominantly. I'll also look at the 1 hour from time to time. It depends on the name and how fast it's moving. Primary is my 4 hour charts, but I also look at the 1 hour if things are moving really quick, just because they tend to be way too extended in the 4 hour. You get a little bit more data on the 1 hour chart in those examples. So I'll go over that here. Let's look at some of the big cap names first. I'm just going to march down the list and from memory in terms of just some of the market cap names. So I'm going to start with XRP. We did discuss this one here shortly. Someone was asking about XRP. Do I think it's due for a pop? They're asking the Slack group. And I said, I think so. XLM had already taken off. And I think a lot of these names that have been the laggards lately are due for some catch up. You're seeing XRP potentially forming. Now, let's be fair. This chart is messy, right? We had that big spike and this really choppy stuff here. It's not a clean chart by any means, but if you look at the daily chart, it is due for some bounce off the lows. Maybe there's this big double bottom starting to form here. Multi-month basis on a lot of these alts being built versus Bitcoin. And so XRP is certainly one of those that has a lot of attention. I'm not going to comment on the fundamentals of this or the, do I like the project or what it stands for. That's kind of besides the point here. I'm just looking at the charts and the technicals, and clearly there's some support starting to be formed here over the last month. Definitely worth noting. Could see those big spikes off the lows and finally play a little bit of catch up versus Bitcoin. The USD chart looks obviously a little bit stronger than this, but that's because the price of Bitcoin has been going up here recently. But the BTC pair hasn't really been outperforming Bitcoin, but I think it's finally due for a little bit of bounce action. If we go to the 1 hour chart here in the last couple of hours, taken off here a little bit in sympathy probably with XLM, which we will look at here shortly, but XRP is one that's, hasn't outperformed yet, but I'm thinking may start to do so here in the near term. ETH is another one that's looking good here. Now this one did have a big double bottom that was in play on that daily chart here. The early entry point on something like this, when you're looking at a reversal trade, I like to look at the price action, of course, as a leading indicator. And the early entry point was really back in here when it finally, there was this little consolidation, a little bit of a pullback, had that shakeout, quick shakeout reversal. And when it recaptured that line there around that 179 level, that was really kind of the early entry point. First target was the neckline, which it has run to and actually consolidated around before. And then the next target was this blue line around 196 and then 202 on the BTC pair. And so far that's playing out nicely. A lot of strong volume coming in. As we know, Ethereum Classic has been on a tear. Maybe Ethereum finally gets some rotation out of that and back into this one here. But ETH, it's always nice when you see some of these big cap names outperform. It just kind of confirms what we're seeing in the broader altcoin space. So Ethereum looking pretty good here, continues to move higher. If we zoom in and look at the 4 hour chart here, let me hide this side stuff here for you guys. The secondary entry point, and this is one of the strategies that I'm liking right now, is you get those big pushes off the lows, and then we see some consolidation that lands right into these moving averages. And so I like both the pullback entries on some of those, so kind of buying the dip, if you will. Of course, to a point, right? If it breaks a certain level, then eventually, then I was wrong. I got to get out of the way. But looking at those pullbacks into these moving averages, I prefer to do that right now than chase the big green candles. We're still seeing some of this backfilling and pausing and then the next leg up. And right now the momentum continues. You're seeing some good follow through on a lot of these moves. When they have a breakout, they pause, they take a breather, and then they show us another leg higher. And so until that works, until it stops working, right? That's the good method right now. Instead of chasing at the highs, looking for these little dips, these pullbacks. If the buyers remain in control, generally pullbacks look like some good secondary points. You can also wait for a little trend break. So in the case of ETH, it started to put a little bit of a bull flag on that 4 hour chart. You can also wait for that to finally start poking above and then looking at those entries there. And we've seen a few of those here. Let's go to the next one, BCH, for example, BTC. Another very similar one. You could have waited for this trend to finally break, or looking at these dips right at these moving averages there. And so that's what I'm liking right now. If you missed that initial move, these little trend following moves are nice because they're simple. They're not very complicated. What you do is you do a moving average pair. I use exponential moving averages. And I like to buy the dips there as opposed to looking at, the big extension there. But that's what I'll look for. And I'll also look for, those breakouts from these flag patterns, these little fullback entries. And the key with the flag pattern, the pullback entry, you want to see big volume on the move up. And then as it starts to consolidate, you want to see the volume really start to dry up. And you can look at here, this last candle before it popped was, almost non-existent volume, just very small. And then as the volume starts coming in, this starts to rally again, giving you a second leg up. And what I'm doing is I'm generally scaling in and out. And so what I'll do is instead of chasing those breakouts, a lot of folks will wait until it actually takes out the prior levels and they call that a breakout. Instead of doing that, I'll wait for the trend to break, either jump in there or at the moving average. And then what I do is I actually scale out during the breakouts. So if it starts to take out those prior highs, I like to take some off the table there and just kind of lock in some gains, move the stops up, let the rest run, if you will. And so as opposed to chasing the breakouts and kind of catching those, I'll either buy on a pullback, a secondary entry, and then I'll sell a little bit into the highs, especially if short-term moving averages, or excuse me, short-term RSI starts to get extended, right? So like you saw back here, ideally you're due for a pause, even if it's just a sideways move, best case, and maybe even a dip. And so when I start to see those things start to pop higher again, then that's another clue to, hey, let's tighten the stops or take some off. The risk is always, you take too much off and then you miss one of those Dash or Ethereum Classic type of moves where it just suddenly really starts to run. You get those massive squeezes, and right now the market is giving those. I mean, that's nice, can't complain. And if you're lucky enough to catch some of those before they take off like that, the hard part is, where do you get out? How wide of a stop do you give it, so that you can try to ride the trend as long as possible? And there's just a couple of different ways to do that, but it's certainly not easy. Rarely does anybody get out at the exact top and back in at the exact bottom, especially not on a consistent basis. You may do it from time to time if you're lucky, but you're not going to do it consistently. And so, don't beat yourself up if you leave some on the table and you see it take off. It's painful, I know, I do it all the time, but it's definitely, just wait for the next trade, wait for the next good risk reward entry. And that's the key here, right? You're always looking at risk reward. So if you pull up the risk management tool here on TradingView, for example, let's say I jumped in on that candle at the high of that candle and I put my stop, somewhere along these levels, then I'm always looking for at least a 2-to-1, ideally a 3-to-1 risk reward ratio. And so looking at a 2-to-1, it would only have to get to here to give me my 2-to-1. Clearly that's happened already. If I wanted a 3-to-1, then I'd be looking at right around here for a 3-to-1, right? And so you're looking at a 13% upside for a 4.5% downside risk. And of course, depending on where you get in and how wide your stop is going to absolutely affect your risk multiple ratio. But that's kind of my personal rule of thumb, is 2-to-1 minimum, 3-to-1 ideally. And then when I hit my 3-to-1, I generally always take some off the table. Even if it's not all of it, I always take some off the table at that point, and then let the rest run, because my objectives are always what's the targets there. And then you're always looking at zooming out, go left. You're always looking at what are the next major price levels to be watching, some inflection points. There would be one, there would be one. And then the question is always, hey, could this run up to that point? Let's hold some until there, or does it take off, go to the next level up, secondary levels, right? And that's that's a little bit more advanced in terms of scaling in and scaling out and managing those target and risk levels, but that's what I'd like to look for. How's it looking on the daily chart? Definitely extended, continues to go. Clearly it's going parabolic. Now look at this move. I mean, this is wild to see some of these alts. They're just leading the way up. Just some wild action on these guys. Let's go look at Bitcoin BSV. Do we even want to call it Bitcoin Satoshi Vision? Let's go look at the BSV here. This is looking at the daily chart here. Oops, let me get my lines off of here. These are some prior levels that I was looking at, which just slammed right through, of course. But look at the daily chart, just an insane wick here at the top versus Bitcoin, pulling right back, not doing the Bitcoin Cash move that we're seeing right now. Let me move this wick out of the way, because that's really doesn't mean much here. But you can see price is still drifting lower, was the leader on the way up. And again, this is versus Bitcoin, right? So I'm always looking at these, how are they outperforming versus BTC? Because if Bitcoin's going up, the question is, should I just be holding Bitcoin, or should I try to get a little octane and get some high beta moves to the way up with Bitcoin, right? This looks like a little bit of a descending triangle to me here near the highs. It looks vulnerable. If it takes out this low here around 321, then you could see a quick move down to the next support levels, which would be these prior breakout points. So not one I personally would be looking to buy the dip on based on this price structure, but if it starts to take out that downtrend line, especially this horizontal price point right there, that would really clear some resistance. And if we zoom in on that here, you can see how clear that is. This first big run up, parabolic move, pulled back, found some support, rallied, made a lower high, pulled back for one candle, wicked off there, but then it broke below, hit a new low, and then it tried to rally, and it couldn't recapture that point, and that's since become resistance here for several attempts on this 4-hour chart. Now it's rolling back down. I'm guessing this breaks this support here probably today, so that's what I'd be watching. If it takes it out to the upside, then again, that 3,800 is your kind of horizontal price level to be watching, but probably not the best looking chart right now. There's better looking charts in my opinion. ETH, Litecoin, let's go look at Litecoin. Continues to tear it up. Litecoin pushing right up to this next target around 7,000 after breaking out from this little ascending triangle base that we saw here over the last day or so. Very clean, very nice move. It did have an early entry point here, which it was a little bit shaky around. Looks like it pushed higher, undercut, got really shaky, and then just finally took off. This is the 1-hour view. If we go to the 4-hour view here, never really violated those moving averages to the downside, and so that continued to hold pretty nicely and seen some good volume coming in as it pushes higher. Now keep in mind, on the USD side, this is already up, what, like 30% since last week. Last Friday, last Friday, Litecoin was one of the leaders at the close, had a very strong close on high volume here, and that was on this 10th right here. Very big volume as it pushed above some resistance and pretty much just followed through over the next week, right? So over the last several days, we had this big strong close into the weekend, sat tight, and then just has continued higher and is up very nicely. Even if you look at it from the last week, right, just from that point there, even if you caught it late after the breakout, it's still up 28% just in the last 7 days on the USD pair. So very nice move on Litecoin, some good catch up here. The next major target on Litecoin that I'm watching is right here. It's pretty much there at this point. That was $65, and we commented that on here over the last couple of live streams. This is one we've been looking at, and $65 was the next major target. It looks like it's about to get there, and so very nice move. Where does it go from here? It is extended. I wouldn't be necessarily chasing it at this point, but you guys know that. That's kind of my forte. I'd like to see a little bit of a breather pause, but we just had one for 2 days. If we go back to the 4-hour chart, you know, this was the last little consolidation. Again, that would have been a good opportunity at those little dips, those pullbacks, to start looking at that. But you could also wait for the trend to break, the downtrend, and when it starts to take that out, makes for a good secondary entry point there. So a simple trend following, look at that, and that's really what moving averages help you do, right? It's never about, oh, this price follows the exact moving average to the penny, and every time it touches it, it bounces off. That's really not the point, and I go over that in the video course, the moving averages video course. But they do two things. The moving averages are a nice indicator of what the trend is. Obviously, it's upward, but the direction of the moving averages are always important, right? And also, the correlation between the shorter and the longer moving averages are important, because that little zone in between is generally a good value zone. And so what I like to look for is when it pulls back, does it hold that little space between? And that's a good little value zone to keep an eye on. If it starts to drop below the lower moving average, then at that point I get a little bit more nervous, and you get shaken out sometimes. Like right here would have been a shakeout, but when it pops right back above, nothing says you can't get back in. So that's one way I like to look at it, just a simple trend following mechanism here. And when it gets too extended from the shorter term moving average, like it did up here, right, where price was way up here and the moving average was still way down here, that's definitely not my time to get in. Generally at that point, I'm looking to scale out a little bit, maybe take some profits. The RSI was up near 80 at that point, and so if anything, tighten the stops, let them kind of come off the table and look for a place to reload. So scaling in, scaling out is a good little strategy that I like to do right now, especially when you're trend following, right? You get the higher highs and higher lows, you get the pullback, looks like it's in, another rally, another pullback, another rally, another pullback. At some point it's going to turn and you'll be wrong, right? You'll get a pullback that doesn't hold, and that's likely the end of the move, or it goes choppy from there. So at some point it doesn't work, but while the move is strong and the trend is your friend, those pullback entries make for some nice little pauses from which you can jump on and catch the next leg up if you missed it. If you missed that initial breakout, right? So that's Litecoin, still looking pretty good there. Let's go back to the LTC Bitcoin chart. Also at the target here on Bitcoin. So interesting that it's hitting a price target on both the USD pair as well as the BTC pair. So has had quite the move, has been the leader one of the leaders this week, but it is certainly running into some interesting territory here as we start to enter a little bit of a resistance zone. And so we'll see if Litecoin finally takes a breather and we get some rotation to some of these other names. EOS, looking at EOS BTC here, was a good breakout candidate. Finally saw that pop, pulled right back to the breakout point. That would have made for a nice little secondary entry point on that candle there, right to the moving averages, and starting to show some follow through here. If we go to the 4-hour chart on EOS, again, same kind of strategy. You had that breakout, don't need to chase it, wait for a pause or at least some sideways. And if you didn't want to buy the dip, then oftentimes I will look for a break of that flag. This big candle was kind of it, but it did give a little shakeout. This one hasn't been quite as clean. The daily chart looks fine. It's starting to edge up, but a little bit more choppy here near the highs. What are some targets for EOS? Let's go look at EOS daily chart here. I really like this daily chart just because it's such a huge base here off the lows. So next major target is this zone here around 48.40, give or take 48.50. So it's got a little bit more room to run above, to 4,800 is going to be the first target there. And then above that, man, you got a lot of room to run. There's just this big gap between here and the next major wall. If we look at it from the USD side, EOS USD, very nice move over the last week, just from the 10th. Last Friday, it started its real big move, up about 35% on the USD side. So very good. I know some of you guys have been on EOS. Congrats. That one's looking pretty interesting there. And it is, kind of approaching another level here, if you will. There's a couple of them there that I'd be watching. $4 and then $4.60, $4.50, give or take. I would call it $4.50. That's probably the more appropriate level. So $4.50, $4.60. But hey, it's always interesting when the trend works and the follow through works and the pullbacks hold and we're hitting targets. It's like, wait a minute, what's happening? Is crypto trading fun again? It feels like it, but fight the FOMO, my friends. Fight the FOMO because, eventually these big moves, these parabolic moves top out. I mean, they don't always fully retrace, but when something's going like this, you got to be careful about getting too excited and chasing at the highs and just kind of loading up after the big move because inevitably there's some pause and pullback. Doesn't mean it doesn't keep going, but the risk reward is certainly not there at that point. And so some of the things that I'm looking at here are those laggards and looking for some of those to turn around. TRX is one of them. So looking at Tron, this one has been a laggard as of late and is finally breaking this downtrend on the daily. Last few days have been pretty choppy, but it's starting to get some upside momentum. I think it plays some catch up here before the move is over. Going to that 4-hour chart, we can see that was a big break above the downtrend line on volume too. And so that was a nice power pivot that we saw there. It had a good initial move up to the highs and then gave you a pullback secondary entry, and that's generally where I like to look at it, on those little throwbacks, and wait for them to either bounce off the line or start taking some preemptive shots there with your stop, just right below the breakout point. And here it is bouncing off and still hasn't quite cleared these highs, but so far it's looking positive. Again, the volume here on this last candle is looking positive. So nothing is ever 100%. None of these strategies ever work every time, but it helps you put the odds in your favor when you look for those momentum moves, you look for those pullback entries, because then your risk is a little bit smaller, your upside potential is a little bit bigger, and it just puts the odds in your favor. And if you can string together enough of those winners, it'll more than offset the times that it doesn't work. But this is good. This is one I was avoiding until I finally broke this downtrend. Wasn't liking it. I know you guys had asked about it last week during the stream, and I said just wait until it breaks this downtrend, because for now it just, there's better things out there, and there were. And there was plenty of other names that were much better. This is an interesting one for a potential reversal trade and finally playing some catch up here. I'd be looking at some of these fib levels that already kind of went to the 618. See if it can keep going higher there. How's it look on the USD side? Pretty nice move, and that was a solid breakout over this price right there. What was that, 1506 or so, 1508, give or take. A little bit of a reversal, higher highs, higher lows. Look how it really tightened up for a few days, and then one big day, boom. So very nice. Ethereum Classic, why is it pumping? I don't know. But man, oh man, look at that move. Clearly has gone parabolic. As they often say, you know, 80% of the move comes at the last, or 90% of the move comes at the last 10% of the time. And so when you look at the actual, you know, time that this has happened, right, you have basically 28 days, and, you know, clearly the last 3 days has seen the bulk of this move. I mean, you look at this, 75% up just in the last 3 days. You know, the first 20 days was up 47%, the last 3 days up 75%. So that by definition is a parabolic blow-off move. Where does it go? It's anyone's guess how high it ultimately goes, but I can tell you this, its time is finally going to run out eventually, and I'm betting that's going to happen in the next couple of days, if not sooner. But at what price is anyone's guess. I mean, you can have these insane green candles, these parabolic moves, climactic tops, but you know, from a timing perspective, this guy is way overcooked. Watch, it doubles from here. It's okay. I'm not going to chase this guy here. Ethereum Classic. What are some of the other names? So another strategy that I'd be looking at here is when you get those flat bases, while everything is kind of moving higher, especially the names that are generally popular to trade, right? Something like a Link. Ethereum had this similar setup here recently, but you get these little, they're choppy, but you look at them, let me go to the 4-hour chart here. You know, you have this little range that starts to set up. On these cases where it's very defined, the support and resistance levels, in this case, instead of buying the dips, I will wait for that range to finally clear and then look for that to take it on the way up, or look for a throwback to the top of the range if you get it. You don't always get it, especially if it's a powerful move out. You might get a pullback, but you may not get it all the way back to the top of the range. If you're really brave, then you buy near the low end of the range with a tight stop, and you're banking on just this kind of range trade, right? But in this market, you know, with the momentum and the trend following, I like those breakouts that have a lot of volume. Let me clear these. I'm doing this here. And I like to wait for those. So this was a very good example of one. Cardano's another one where I was waiting for this one to finally play some catch up, and we're seeing it. And here was a little bit of a breakout here, pullback. You could have, you know, there was 2 breakout levels here. Let me move this lower wick. It's bugging me. There we go. So you had this initial very strong move off the bottom, a very, you know, quick spike, if you will, that took out this first resistance level. What was that, around 465 or so? And then it kind of just chopped around and paused. And then it looked like it was about to get going again. It had a quick throwback, and that was a nice little pullback entry at the moving averages, which was also the breakout, the top of the first breakout level around 465, and then it started to go again, and here it is taken out to this next level of resistance, and also showing some good follow through. And this was one that I was watching because I thought, hey, a lot of these other big cap names have played, have rallied, have participated. This one has not. And, you know, names like Tron, XRP, XLM, I'm thinking they're going to at least have a little bit of a move to play some catch up. They may not turn out to be the big winners like some of these others have, but I'm thinking they have a little bit of a play. And we're starting to see that here with Cardano and some of these other names playing a little catch up here. Not catch up, catch up. USD, how's it look on the tether? You could tell it's almost lunchtime for me. I'm getting a little hungry. BTC is starting to turn around here, starting to dump. Did we finally get the pause? Went to 9K. We'll come and look at BTC here. This is Cardano USD here, just looking at the USD price to see it did hit a little bit of resistance here and is pausing again. But if we zoom out on this daily chart, that's been a nice little move. Again, the breakout was there, a pullback. And, you know, I just prefer the pullbacks. Sometimes you miss them, you don't get a pullback. But look at, you get this breakout, You get this big pullback right here. Those just make for some better entries in this current market environment. They seem to be working. So when things are really strong and going crazy, you can kind of preempt to the breakouts. I don't think we're there yet. Most of these setups are generally reversal trades. Short term, they're trend following trades, but pretty nice action there. All right, let's go look at Bitcoin here. What's BTC doing? Is it finally done? Oh, it's testing that 9K. The battle at 9K continues. A little bit of a wick pullback. Oh man, are we starting to see some distribution here? We'll see. If we go to the RSI levels here, let me go to a different BTC. I'm going to go to BTC on a different exchange here real quick, just so it's a little cleaner. We'll go Bitstamp again. If you go to the RSI, there are some divergences, Sean. Not a huge, because this most recent spike over hasn't been exactly a huge move, right? It's only $150 or so over this prior high, but there are some divergences starting to show up as RSI is not confirming, nor is the MACD histogram on this most recent leg up. If we do zoom in a little bit more, the 1 hour chart also shows something similar. Not as big, but just a little cautious here. It is near the high. It is right below that major resistance level that we've all been looking at. So, and if you missed it, or if you haven't seen yesterday's video, this little bit of a wall here is worth noting in terms of the broader price. Now, that doesn't mean like this is the end of the move and that's it, back to bear market, but it's certainly worth paying attention to. Again, what I'd like to see personally, I would like to see a pullback. I think 82, 8400 would be very healthy if it consolidates up at those levels, lets things cool off on the lower time frames, resets a little bit of this euphoria that's starting to creep back into the space, and then that also gives it some legs to finally sustain when it pushes over 9K, if that's what it wants to finally do. So that's my personal, I'd like to see that. We'll see if that happens. Things are just getting a little choppy up here. Again, I think the better trade has been in the alt space anyway, just kind of very quickly outperforming Bitcoin. Even on Bitcoin Cash, for example, right? This is a very short trade. I mean, you're talking, just not even 24 hours. At one point was up 13%, still up 10% versus Bitcoin. So some of those quick moves are nice. Let me see here. So what other names do we want to look at here? Stellar, we'll go look at that one. Lisk has been strong. Zcash has been strong. Monacoin has been strong. Let's go look at some of these here. Zcash, a little bit of a breakout, pausing, pulling back here. But man, some of these names are just crazy strong. Nice little breakout there on Zcash. This is the 1 hour chart, mind you. What were some of the other ones? Lisk. Oh man, there's a name from yesteryear. Lisk. Let's look at the daily chart. I'm curious to see how brutal that looks. It's not bad. Not bad. It's only down 1,000,000% from the highs. We can recover. Man, this bad boy dropped to 98%. There's only one way to go from here, and that's up. Well, not necessarily. We go sideways forever. But, oh, man. Lisk. I don't know what's going on with this guy. They're seeing some volume coming in, some good spikes here off the lows. Maybe it's just a bounce, counter trend rally. Who knows? How's ARK? At one point, they would correlate. Not so much these days. All right. Move on. Monacoin. Mona has just been moving. Now, these are some ugly wicks here on this. Look at this. Up 43% and then comes right back down. There's some tough wicks. Those smaller cap names are always tough to play. Let's see here. Ethereum Classic. Stellar Lumens. The Lumens were looking stellar. Nice little pop off the lows here today. Going to that 1 hour chart here, you can see it's got very extended very quickly, pulling right back. See if it holds these moving average pairs right here. Somebody asked about which moving averages am I using here. In this chart here, I've got the 10 exponential moving average and the 22. I think that's shown on here. Yeah, 10 and 22. And you don't have to use, an exact number. I like the 10, generally speaking. You could use the 9, you could use the 8. I think some exchanges have their own defaults, like Coinbase, for example, will use the 12 and the 26. But the idea is I generally use a pair that is approximately 2 times each other. So like if you're using a 10, then use 20, 22. If you're using a 12, use a 24, 26 or something. If you're using an 8, then go with the 20 or even a shorter one. But that's generally what I like to do, is use a moving average pair, and for a number of reasons, which I kind of go over in more detail on the tutorial videos. But that's what I like to use if you guys are wondering. Keep in mind this looks quickly extended, but definitely got to keep those on the radar, because in the big picture, this could be day one of a big reversal. Certainly worth noting, the volume here is the highest volume we've seen since early November, and this is coming off of some very oversold conditions, and it was due for a bounce. You saw some bullish divergences starting to show up here during the most recent lows, and with the rest of the market finally showing some life, then even though it got a quick spike and pulling right back, definitely worth watching. I wouldn't necessarily write these off, because this could be the beginning of a longer move here over the next couple of days and weeks. So definitely worth noting. I'm going to keep an eye on this one here for sure. It's pulling right back to the line, so like I said, this little zone here would be very ideal to look at. Tezos, yeah, XTZ is another one of those that I like here. How's it looking here? This was looking like a reversal yesterday, a big push off the lows here, and coming off of oversold conditions, popped right to the 22 EMA on the daily, and it's pulling right back. Definitely worth watching. I may have to add to some here for a potential reversal trade. And the way I would look at that is some fib levels as my potential target. So let's say it bounces off this daily 10 EMA. The 382 is usually your first target, then the 50%, and then your 618 level. But I always look left, see if they line up with any particular support resistance. This is the last major swing high. It's just above the 382. And so between, what is that, 1860 and 1910, give or take, that would be the first target that I'd be watching for. But the broader trend certainly is still downward. Those reversal trades are much tougher. They don't follow through as much as the trending ones, where you get those uptrends, pull back, uptrends, pull back. Those generally are a higher probability, right? The trading with the trend is always much better. But these big reversal trades, after having a name that was so strong, trending down, maybe pops, I'd be keeping an eye on those. But let's go back to the lower time frame here. Pulling right back on the 4-hour chart to these moving averages here. I may have to look at it at this point, but let me see. This 1-hour chart's getting a little spiky. A lot of this honestly is going to come down to, what does Bitcoin do? A lot of these moves have already kind of run their course. They've had a good run here over the last week and a half, and the big question is, if Bitcoin decides to pause here at 9K and finally pull back 8,200, 8,400, what do the alts do, right? Do they kind of hold their own versus BTC, or do they decide to all retreat, as is often the case? So that's going to be interesting to see. And Bitcoin often will put the brakes on a lot of those altcoin rallies. Best case is usually when Bitcoin just kind of chops and flops and does one of these for a while, because then the alts generally will just kind of have their run and enjoy the party. Enjoy the parents being away. Let's go look at some of these other ones real quick. Chainlink has been nice. Monero, BNB, Neo, Icon, Zcoin still going. XCZ. Did I get that wrong? XZC. That's what I thought. That's what I thought. Zcoin. Still going. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 days. What a big breakout after it cleared that resistance here. Look at that. Got a pretty little shaky there near the highs right here. It was pulling back, and then just bang. After that breakout, how much are we talking about here? It's up about 50% in the last 4 days. These altcoins are leading the way. Link. covered Link, I believe. Link is interesting here because, it already had that breakout. Let me go to the 4-hour chart here. This was the last little breakout. This first target here was around that 3,100. Wicked above it, pulling right back in, but still moving, holding the moving averages there. That lines up well with this prior swing high that we saw on December 11th. And then above that, probably not a lot of resistance from a price perspective until way up here. And so from there, I'd be looking at more fib retracement levels, or just for the trend to finally break, some moving averages kind of letting it run. So if it can start to close above this level on the daily chart, you're kind of in no man's land here for quite a bit. There's just a big open space here. And so, but again, at that point, it's price action, right? The 10 EMA is way down here still near 2770. It's had a big move already on big volume. And so we'll see how it does. It already broke out. I'm not saying it's a sell, but just watch the trend, watch these moving averages here on the short term. BSV just broke down. We looked at that one here short. Let's go take a look at that one there. Oh, it is wicking below that that level we were watching. Okay. So if you're late, I did cover some of the bigger cap names here. I was looking at ETH and Bitcoin and XRP, XLM. I think we covered what? EOS, Cardano, Tron, a handful of those here. Alts have been on fire here for the last week, leading the way up here. Litecoin was beautiful this week. But, the big question is, have they run their course? Have they hit their targets here? And a lot of them have hit their first targets. I think it's just going to come down to Bitcoin. I think it's going to be, what does Bitcoin do? They've been following suit. So if Bitcoin continues to look strong and can break out of that 9,100 level, then I would expect that the alts continue and participate. But if Bitcoin pulls back, then we could see that that same one here. So, all right, let's see here. I'm reading the comments here. Oh, that's interesting. You multiply 7 for your moving averages. So 7, 21, 77, 231. I'll have to look at that. What else here? VeChain. Yeah, we'll look at VeChain, Icon. Take a look at those. Just catching up on some of those. Metal, BAT. All right, let me make some notes here. I'll catch some of those names here. So we'll look at BAT, VeChain, Icon. What else do you guys want to look at here? The Verge Army is back. Oh, what are some of the small names here? I'm wondering if some of these small names are going to play along here. It's mostly been big cap, and you generally what you see is starts to trickle into those big caps that haven't performed, and then some of the mid cap, mid-tier names, and then the small cap names run. Some of them have already been running for a little bit, but not across the board. It's mostly been, the bigger cap, mid-tier names. So we looked at Litecoin. Let's look at a few more of these names here. Then we'll jump into some small cap names here. Icon. Nice little push on Icon in the last few days here, coming off the lows. And so looking very nice. Again, these are tough. They're tough to trade because when you see these big volume, near the highs, in a big reversal, it certainly gives you pause. But like I said here, some of these pullback entries, even if you don't take it off the pullback, once it starts to recapture some of those moving averages, those are good secondary entry points, because then at that point you have a clear swing low from which you can set a stop, whether it's the current candle or the ultimate swing low or just below that, right? And then from there you have, okay, here's my stop. Then what are some targets? You can look at the horizontal price targets. So if we look at this guy here, for example, or here, right, those are kind of some bigger picture targets. And then you can look at, does that line up with some risk reward metrics that I follow? So if it got to that first target there, that's a 3.2 to 1 risk reward ratio, and that would be acceptable for me, right, in my personal trading strategies. I'd be willing to give it 4%, 5% to the downside for a potential 15% to the upside. Of course, price action is always first. So if things really start to roll over and, you know, tons of distribution and it doesn't quite get the target, then you got to take some action at that point. But when you're coming in, when you're setting your plan, you know, you have to have a plan. What are some potential targets? Where am I going to get out if I'm wrong? And then you set your plan and then you go, right? And then you just kind of wait for the price action to kind of dictate at that point. Let's see here. I'm following along here on the comments. Sorry, I was reading. BTC bats. Interesting one here. Potential setup coming here. I'd watch this lower trend line though, because it looks a little wedgy, which is usually not good. So if it takes out that 22 EMA on the 4-hour, probably going to make a lower low, right? This could turn out to be a lower high if it does, but not too bad. Definitely not a bad low risk entry point here if you like it. So if I did that, this is probably the way I would trade it. If I were looking to get on some bat here, 22 EMA would be a very tight stop, less than 2%. If you wanted to give it more, I would maybe give it to like this wick low down here. Makes it about a 3% stop. And then your first target is, does it take out this most recent high? And that's also these prior highs back in here. And that gives you about a 2.5 R. Not too bad. Not too shabby. With a 3% stop, you know, something that's that tight, generally that means I can make a bigger position than if it was a wider stop. Wider stops, I got to make a smaller position on the trade. So not too shabby, 7% upside. See if we can go on the daily chart here. You know, this is just a sideways move, potential little double bottom coming off here off this big pullback. So then if it takes out this resistance here, then you're talking about a much bigger move in play at that point, right, on that daily chart. From there, I'd be looking more at some measured move targets, and that'd be a big move if we could take out that double bottom. You're talking this, which would basically, that projects almost to the highs there, so that'd be a big move at that point. Wouldn't necessarily bank on that, but you know, 22%. Hey, not too shabby. That's like what Ethereum Classic does in 10 minutes. Let's go look at that one again. Very nice. So yeah, what are my two favorite moving averages? Someone asked about that earlier. I use the 1022. Those are my two favorite EXM, the exponential moving averages. 1020 works fine, 1224 or 1226 works fine, but 1022 is definitely my favorites. On multiple time frames, right? Daily time frame, 4-hour time frame, they work great. So yeah, the moving average pair gives you a little bit more data than just a single moving average, because if single moving average, what tends to happen is people fall into the school of thought of it's got to hold the line, and if it breaks below a specific moving average, then that invalidates it, and that's just not often the case. A bigger moving average, maybe, right? 200 or something, maybe. But a short-term moving average, the pair gives you more data. It tells you the trend. It tells you how quickly the trend is moving. For example, if the moving averages start to fan out, right, then it tells you, hey, the trend is really starting to pick up some steam here, maybe getting exponential. The moving averages as a pair give you some value areas to look at on pullbacks, that space between. And it's, you know, just things like crossovers. When you get bullish or bearish crossover on the moving averages, that's another data point. So it's just more helpful when you have two, in my opinion. There's a million ways to do this. No one way is the right way or the best way. It just kind of comes down to your trading strategy, the time frame you're looking at, and all that good stuff here. Let's take a quick break. If you are not familiar with the Node Insider's site, there is a site that I set up to kind of give you an informational overview, learncryptotrading.info. It is linked, I believe, in the video notes. But this site for sure is. Go check that out. We are running a promo right now. If you use code 2020, you get $20 off your first payment, and you also get an invite to our Slack group and join the conversation there. Let's see here. We did look at EOS. We didn't look at NEM. I'll go look at EOS. NEM's a name from yesteryear. EOS, we looked at that guy there. We did VeChain. I will cycle back on some of these. Let me get through the last of the names that people have asked for, and then we'll take a look at some of those. NEM, you know, fundamentally, I'm just not bullish on NEM at all in terms of the project. They just had some potential, but just didn't do a lot of things right here. Who knows? But you know, near term, it just has these. It's just a tough one to trade, right? Because you get these big moves on big volume, and it looks like, hey, this is going to finally take off, and just doesn't follow through. Technically speaking, shorter term frames are just not very good for this name. I don't think the liquidity is there either like it used to be, but hey, there's a lot of volume coming in off the lows here again today. If we go to the 4-hour chart, you know, it is trending, but certainly trades wide and loose, much bigger swings here on that 4-hour chart. Let's see, I'm going to cycle through. Did I do VeChain? Maybe I didn't do VeChain. It was on the list here. VeChain. I'm going to go to the daily chart here because VeChain, you know, was, let me move this here to the candle bodies, was holding this little base here. Wanted to take out this trend line. So far, that's looking pretty positive because, you know, the last few days it set a little bit of a low, and this downtrend line was kind of, hey, this is decision time. You're going to break up or break down from here. And it's choosing to break higher, which is nice. Moving averages are starting to get taken out. Now, they're still bearishly correlated, you can see here, since back here, the 10 EMA has lived below the 22 EMA for this entire move. And, you know, a couple days of pushing higher will get those back over. But this is looking positive. If you like it here, wouldn't be a bad place to start watching it. Let me go back to the daily chart here. This was also some support, you know, so that could have been a quick shakeout, popping right back above the line. So all in all, not too shabby. If I looked at it here, the way I'd play this here is I'd probably go with a daily time frame on this name, just because it's shorter time frames is probably not ideal. We'll look at the USD pair here, but you know, I'd give it here maybe a few wicks. That's wide. It's about 10%, but this name moves pretty quick, so even a 2-to-1 is about a 19% mover. And that also gets you to around this prior swing high. So that would make sense if that was a good first target. If you looked at the fib levels, that's also the 50% retracement level, just below the 618. So that'd be my my first major targets in and around there on the daily chart. Looking at it from the USD side, this one already broke out of that range there. That was the level to be watching. This was your early entry back here. Rallied, pulled back. Nice pullback entry like I mentioned here. And popping off that line. Very nice. Good volume coming in too. So USD pair looking pretty strong as well. Digibyte. Now we're getting into small cap land here. Let me zoom out. Digibyte. Yeah, you know, when you have a chart that looks like this, it's just kind of so tiny and basically dead, no trading volume. These are tough because the liquidity is not quite there. You can get some big percentage moves quick, but, you know, it's tough to take a huge position or load the boat on something like this. And, you know, from a percentage basis, this is huge because it's, you know, you're going 75 to 110 sats. That's a lot. That's the 38% move. But it cuts both ways. Just as quickly it could drop 30%, right? So that's the thing with the smaller cap names. It makes them a little bit tougher. They make for some big moves, some nice moves, but you know, generally it's not a load the boat name, if you will. At least not for me. The load the boat names for me are generally, you know, the bigger cap names. I'm willing to take a little bit more of a position size or even some leverage there. Tether looks to finally be breaking the downtrend, but you got to remember that's because Bitcoin and some of these other, just the market as a whole is breaking up, and so you know, by default a lot of these names will move higher USD wise. But I'm always looking at the BTC pairs on some of these here. Another smaller name is Mana, one I'm liking here. Pulling right back here. It's been a little bit of a tougher trade. If you go to the 4-hour chart, you know, it's been on this pullback here the last few days, popping off the lows, pulling right back to this moving average. See if it can finally get going there. It's got some fundamental catalysts coming up that I think may help it as well. But again, tougher to trade these smaller names, a little bit more wide and loose for sure. Let's see here. I'm going to see if I can find any other small. What's this G-Byte? O-Byte. Let's see. O-Byte. Let's go take a look at that. An open cryptocurrency platform ready for the real world adoption. ICO platform. Developer friendly. B2B insurance. All right. So that's O-Byte. Cosmos. Yeah, let's go look at Cosmos. Let's go look at some of these other real quick here. So did we do ICX? I know somebody asked for Icon. Nice little tread following there. Taking out some resistance here. Next major target on this guy here, about 1850, and then 2000. Round number there. Metal, BTC. Nice little pop off the lows. Some good volume coming in here on the last day. Let's go to the 4-hour chart. Starting to go a little symmetrical here with, you know, higher lows and lower highs. See if it follows through. Volume's drying up here on this consolidation, so I guess that's positive compared to the big volume here on the way up. Again, the smaller cap names are just a little bit different. You got to trade them a little bit different. Got to give them some wider stops, in my opinion. But generally, you get also the bigger move up when they finally do work. You can, 30% move is not unusual for some of these smaller cap names, especially coming off the lows. But again, this is reversal trading, reversal position. Much tougher when you're looking at something that's been in this big downtrend, but it is trying to pivot off of some long time lows here. If you look at the long time chart there, that's the low that's held since about August, so we'll see if it finally can bounce off of there. Ontology, Cardano, KNC. Question on the subscription there. Can you pay with Bitcoin? Not at the moment. It's credit card or PayPal only. Because of some of the functionality, the way it's set up. Someone else asked me earlier in the Slack group about paying with BTC, but it would just require a lot more manual updates to the back end on my side. So for now, I apologize. It's not set up for crypto. What I am looking at, however, is doing like an upfront payment where you can pay with crypto, but you got to pay for, let's say, 6 months at a time or something. And then I can set up some webhooks where then it'll just automate, right? That's the key there is I want to make it so it's a little bit more automated in terms of controlling access. Because right now, if you're a subscriber with a PayPal or credit card, then it is automated, and when your subscription expires and all that good stuff, then it just kind of does all the updates automatically on the back end. It's just hard to manually track all of that. KNC here, pretty wide and loose here, but it is looking positive. Coming off the lows, little double bottom there, right back to the throwback, right? So this was the prior breakout point. You can see prior resistance back here, June, August, October, finally breaks out in November, pulls right back to that point. This is a tough one to trade, but it is a little double bottom here off the lows and good action coming up. Big target here is that 3,500, 3,600 level, which it almost wicked up to here today. It may be hard to see on the screen there, but there was a wick up to about 3,500 before pulling back here. Let's dial it in a little bit. Let's go to that 1 hour chart. Big 1 hour wick here on volume, pulling right back though. So we'll see. This one might get ready to run. The trend so far is looking positive. Nice little trend line starting to form there, right at the moving averages too, so not too bad. KNC, and that's what this trending list is here, by the way. And for those of you that are on the Slack group, I did post some links to these. These will eventually be added to the site itself on the education page, but I posted a video for the trending list. I posted a video for the alerts overview, and then when was it, late last week, I also posted some videos for the BMI matrix and the bot status And so little by little, re-recording a lot of the tutorials and explaining, you know, a lot of this, what it is, how to use it, all that good stuff. Those eventually will be all linked here on this education page, and you'll be able to access them from the site. But for now, they're on the Slack group. So if you're part of the Slack channel, go check those out there. Okay, let's see here. I'm looking at any others that we want to look at here. Hey, I really appreciate that feedback, Paul. And you know, you mentioned a good point, because I say this sometimes here. I probably don't say it enough, but you here in your comment, you said, you know, it helps me to narrow down the names and the setups. And that's exactly what it's intended to do, because as I often say, right, whether it's stocks or crypto or Forex or anything, you're only as good as the names you trade, and you want to focus on those names that are in play. You want to focus on the names that are getting the action, the names that are getting some momentum, the names that have the volume, maybe there's some fundamental catalysts, but those generally will do much better, at least on a consistency basis, will help you much better than if you're kind of just looking at the charts and finding setups and just kind of waiting for something to break out or trying to pick at the bottom, or if you're going short trying to pick the top, right? It's a lot easier to just focus on, hey, what's moving? Even if it's a little extended near term, keep it on the list, because you know, strength begets strength, as we've seen this week here. There's been some incredible moves after something was extended, some pullbacks, some pauses, things like Ethereum Classic, things like Dash, Bitcoin Cash, Bitcoin SV. They had some big moves, so appreciate the feedback. But yeah, that's definitely something that you want to, you know, on any trading for everybody, focus on the best names. You know, and when I do my stock trading, for example, you know, I have a couple of names that I generally will keep an eye on all the time, but every day is generally a different ticker. And I'm just trading those names in play, the names that have some catalysts, whether it's an earnings release or some news, something like that, because that's where the momentum's going to be. That's where a lot of the traders are going to be. And also, the names that are not really in play, they're going to have a lot of algos. They're just kind of trading them around, and you will get chopped up trying to fight the algos. And so I generally avoid them altogether and just focus on those handful of names that have some sort of catalyst, momentum, big volume, that sort of thing. Yeah, so how do I go through the stocks? I mean, I have some services that I pay for that are some screening services that will help me, you know, filter those. You can set them up on your own. Finviz helps you do that. Maybe even Google Finance. There's things called what is it called? The Trade Ideas Screener is one. It's expensive. I think it's like $100 a month or something. And you can set up your own custom screens and all that good stuff. But that'll narrow the universe of stocks, you know, thousands of stocks down to at least 20 or so, right? And that's how I'll do that. And so that's a lot of what this is intended to do, right? Give you those early signals. Let's go look at let's go see what's overbought. Hey, Ethereum Classic. Who would have thought? Ethereum Classic. Augur. Hey, Augur was moving yesterday. Let's go look at that one. I forgot about that one. And then we'll look at what's on the move here today. Oops. Potential pullback. Let's go to the 4-hour chart. That's better. Right to the moving average pair. I'll be watching this one, guys. Had that big spike off the lows yesterday. If you go to the chart here, pulling back, nice big move, another rally, and then just a monster spike here after breaking this downtrend. Didn't give any warning or nothing, just poof. But there's been a lot of volume here at the highs that's not bullish at all. Tons of selling showed up here near the highs. I don't know if it was a pump or a rumor or what. I wasn't following this one, but I did see it come across the alerts. It hit the trending list yesterday, so I'd be watching it. But right back at these moving averages right now. So Hey, thanks, Matthew. Appreciate the feedback on that, man. BCH, USD, Lisk. We looked at Lisk. We looked at VeChain. We looked at Cardano, Litecoin, XRP, XLM. We've looked at most of these here. We haven't looked at Monero. Was on the move 2 hours ago. Zcash. We looked at Raven 6 hours ago. Is that doing anything? Raven. Apparently I was looking at this sometime recently. Here's the 4-hour view of Raven making Raven higher highs, higher lows. This was really the good little bull flag to break out of. That was also the symmetrical pattern right there, pulling right back to this moving average, also the throwback. So not too bad. This one's coming off of a big reversal too. This is a tough looking chart, man. I mean, there's big spikes up and down. Very tough. I mean, if you're lucky enough to catch some of those moves up, great, but they're short-lived generally. But maybe this is another one. Maybe it's starting off the lows here and it's going to spike up. What else? What else? Link. We looked at some of those. IOTA. I haven't looked at IOTA. All right. Yeah, that's a scary looking one. Cosmos. I'm going to go to the 4-hour view. Had a good power pivot here yesterday. Big reversal, bullish engulfing candle. Look at that. It undercut the prior lows just barely. Popped higher with some strong volume, taking out all the levels. Pulling right back, though. We'll see if it's done. I mean, these are tough names, especially after they've been the prior big winner. Because it's like, is this just a shakeout? Is it the start of something new? Is it the people that were buying up here getting out? Like, it's a tougher call at that point, but certainly worth watching here. I mean, get this pullback right to the moving average here on the 4-hour chart. That was also this little resistance back here, so definitely worth watching. You get some volume coming down as this retreats here. A pocket pivot, so that's my variant of the pocket pivot that initially the idea came from Gil Morales. So I'm not going to take full credit for that, but if you want to look at, Gil Morales pocket pivot, Morales pocket pivot, he's got a book that is really interesting, covers a lot of trading stuff here. Trading in the Cockpit is probably one of my favorite books from him. He's Trade Like an O'Neill disciple. He used to trade with William O'Neill from Investors Business Daily. So him and Dr. Catcher wrote 2 books here, and so they're pretty cool. But he has a pocket pivot, and what it does, it's kind of an early indicator. In his book, he goes over a ton of different ways on how to use it. But the takeaway is it is a volume indicator. And so he's looking at, certain volume parameters and spikes in volume as a precursor to another move or another breakout or something like that. And so, I used to use that in my stock trading. I generally don't anymore because that was a little bit better for swing trading. But what I ended up doing is adopting some of those ideas and creating some indicators around that here and some alerts around that for crypto. I put my own flavor on them and some additional screens. I don't just look at purely volume. Otherwise, I'd probably have 10,000 pocket pivots a day. But I do look at some other parameters to help me screen out what's a good pocket pivot, what's not. But that's essentially what that is. But yeah, Cosmos. Okay. I'm thinking that's probably running the course of the stream here. I got most of the names. If I didn't, I apologize. Let me look at, there was some stock requests here. Let's go look at a few names there. And so maybe even some gold. Looking at the SPY. Stocks are never coming down ever again. Have you seen the market cap of Apple? Holy moly. Apple is never coming down ever again. Good Lord. What is that, like $1.5 trillion market cap? Incredible move for Apple. If you take the logarithmic chart off, it's almost hilarious. It's like something with a $1 trillion market cap doing this. Wow. Tesla. Tesla finding a top. Look at that daily chart, maybe. Again, crazy move up in Tesla. Nvidia. Oh man, this is a name I used to trade a lot. Look at all my levels down here. I used to trade this one quite a bit. This one, Micron and AMD were the pairs. We trade them quite a bit here. It's been on a nice uptrend since breaking out above that range. Very nice. Nvidia still going, following the moving averages. Good stuff. Looks like they report here 13th of February. It's going to be interesting. Is this all-time highs? No, it's not. All-time highs is what, 280? 280, 290? Pretty cool. Pretty cool. What about gold? What about the gold? Taking a breather. Looking pretty good, actually. Had that big breakout from that downtrend and popped. Look at that big spike higher there. Was that the Iran news? Yeah, that was Iran, right? That was the missiles day and the airline day last week. Was that only last week? Man. So much happening all the time. Yep. All right, so there's gold. I'm going to go back to the weekly chart on gold real quick, then go to silver. But still looking pretty good here. I mean, my first major target last year was at 1550. Finally hit that, pulled right back. It has a good secondary move higher. Gave it enough time to reset that RSI. So if it keeps going, who knows? 1600, 1800. Silver. Silver ever going to play catch up? Maybe. Went from 14 bucks to 18, but gold has been the better trade. And gold has been the better trade because it's a currency. Silver is a little bit more of a hybrid industrial metal. Gold is essentially the anti-dollar. And you'll see that if you compare gold and the euro, very often the charts correlate on the shorter time frames. You'll see gold pop and the euro pops, vice versa. How's euro dollar looking right now? Euro's dropping. So anyway, let's get back to the cryptos names and then we will call it a stream. Looking at BTC here. Whew, it's a messy chart. Taking a pause right at that 9K. Hit the target. Hit 9K almost exactly. 9,010 bucks. 13 bucks. Here, talking to a wall today. Okay, General Electric and Ford. GE, that's a tough one. I don't know. I'm just not bullish on this company long term, fundamentally speaking. It's been bouncing off the lows, but that's a tough one. Ford is interesting because it's got some fundamental plays, some electric vehicle play, the F-150, the Mustang, which I think is an ugly rendition of the Mustang, but it's electric, hybrid, SUV. So who knows? That could be a good catalyst here going into 2020, 2021. Maybe will be some competition to Tesla, but hands down, Tesla's the king of the electric world. No doubt. And it's not just their cars. Keep in mind, Tesla's doing all kinds of really cool tech. The Gigafactory, they're doing partnerships. They're buying up battery companies. So they got a lot more going for them from that perspective. But, man, are they overbought near term. Everything's going to be electric eventually. All the cars are going to go electric. Motorcycles will go electric. Planes going electric now. That's going to be something. It's going to need some good batteries for that. All right, so Link. I think we've covered most of the names here that I was looking at. Green is the new black. That's right. New York City in the house. Cosmos. All right, I'm just kind of looking through the comments here. I'm thinking we caught most of these. What was I doing before this? Oh, I was looking at this here. That's what I was going to do. I was just going to kind of sort this. What's not long right now? So the daily bot status for most of these names has flipped over. As most alts have outperformed Bitcoin. A few that haven't. Man, the daily bot status is not flat for ETH yet. That's interesting. Tezos, I know that. That's because it's a pullback XRP. That makes sense. For ETH, it's not, though. Let's see if it's going to flip soon. Looking at the ETH here. So, and so I did post a video on this as well in the Slack for those of you that are curious about learning more. But the trading bot status uses a major moving average here. Let me pull up just this side of here. And it uses a longer term moving average, and you can see that's this white line here near the top. And so it's a trend following strategy, meaning when it's below that moving average, it's either going to be flat or short. And you can see here, right, it was closed short, here went short, here went flat, here went short again, here went flat. So it's not interested in catching the longs on the bounce until it recaptures that moving average. So that's why the bot status is still flat at this point. What else? At least it's not short across the board. Just a couple of weeks ago, this was red everywhere. Strong, Litecoin is strong, Bitcoin Cash is strong. We know that. Stellar, Cardano, Monero, and Link. So most of these names we've looked at. Monero. A little bit of a battle going on here. Look at this. Look how choppy that looks. But it's trying. Yeah, we'll do Litecoin one more time here. And we'll go back to Bitcoin, and then we will wrap up the stream here. Looking at Litecoin, I looked at it both on the USD and the BTC pair. It is approaching a major target on both pairs, interestingly enough. If we go to the daily chart here, the first big resistance level was around that $6,500 or 500. Wait till Litecoin hits 6,500. $65 level is what I was looking for on Litecoin. We're almost there on the USD side. If you look at it from the BTC side here, another big level here was around 7,000 sats. Hit that today. And then you're kind of in a little bit of a zone, right? You could wick up and down up to around 7,500, maybe 7,600. But then, who knows? Then it's a big breakout at that point. You got a lot of room to run. But ideally, it's one of the stronger names off the lows. Very good action. I was liking this one since last Friday when it had that big breakout on volume. At the time, it looked like big volume. Now the volume looks normal compared to the most recent days. If you look at it this way, for example, that was the way it looked last Friday. It looked very nice. It had that big volume breakout here. Let me pull it up so I can see the volume. And, it was definitely worth noting. Big push up off the lows, big volume at the time. And, of course, we know what happened after that. Price really started to take off, followed through, a little pullback, and gone. But alts, for the most part, are all breaking out, moving up along with Bitcoin. Looking good. Cardano, all right. Cardano moving nicely here. Good push on Cardano. And this was one of the laggards I thought would play some catch up. So, full disclosure, I do have some Cardano trade open. I'm looking at Tezos here on this pullback. Tron's another one on the pullback, breaking trend here, pausing. Daily chart of Tron. Now this is more of a reversal trade, but finally breaking that downtrend, so now it looks a little bit more interesting. Stellar Lumens, very big move today. Definitely got to keep it on the radar. Dash, whatever happened to Dash? Hey, we all knew it was extended. Come on, parabolic. Remember 90% of the move comes to the last 10% of the time, and boy, did Dash prove us all right there. Look at that, holy smokes. I think Ethereum Classic's next. Pullback time. Matic. Matic? Oh man, was that the broken chart, Matic? Oof, brutal. But it is popping off the lows. It has found a little bit of a base here lately. With the Matics of the world, these are tough because we saw this last year. Look at this. Spike up, spike down, spike up. But it is finding a low. This is going to be a big candle to overcome. So on a Matic type of trade, what I like to do if I do take something like this is higher risk. But they're generally reversal bounce trades. That's about it. And I'd be looking at some fib levels as the target. And even then, that's probably a wide target. Might even want to narrow it down to... Ish, that's a tough one. I don't know. That is tough. There's just a lot of resistance. These big red candles just form chart resistance. And it's just really hard to overcome those. Matic. Brutal. But hey, if you're quick on the trade, man, maybe you get some of those quick 20%ers out of it. All right. I think that's it, guys. Thanks for being here. As always, I appreciate the commentary, the good feedback. Appreciate the suggestions and thoughts. And we'll see how the weekend goes. It's always going to be interesting. Bitcoin is, it's at a critical juncture here. As I said, that 9K 9100 level has been an interesting level to be watching here in the big picture. So we'll see. IOST is coming off the list here. I mean, coming off the lows here, off the list. How's it look on that weekly? That's a big picture chart. Maybe due for a reversal. This would be a higher low off of this guy here if it does it, but it's a little bit tougher here. Yeah, maybe not bad. I mean, if it can hold above 70, call it 70 sats, maybe. These small sat names are tough though because percentage-wise, they're wide and loose. I mean, you look at this as a 10% move right there. Doesn't look like much, but that's a 12% candle right there. That's a 20% move right there. Jeez. Chaincoin. Oh my God, I forgot about Chaincoin. Cool. Okay, let's go look at Bitcoin real quick, and then I'm gonna get some lunch. And then I'm going to go for a hike and enjoy the great outdoors and try not to check my charts from the phone. And the trend remains your friend until it ends. But for now, I mean, we're just going to have at a decision point, I think, for Bitcoin here with 9,000, 9,100, this little zone up above. Prices, you can see there's a little battle going on here. There's been some wicks, some attempts to pop over it, but still holding the moving averages on the 4-hour and on the 1-hour. So, shorter time frames are okay. Daily chart, it feels a little stretched, but it's not crazy extended technically. I mean, the RSI is only here, not even at 70, so it could have room to run. But it's gonna be interesting to see where this one plays out over the weekend. I suspect we may see some action this weekend. Who knows? Maybe we'll all get lucky and it's a quiet weekend like last weekend, but I suspect we will see some action. The pullback zones to be watching here, I think a healthy pullback would be between 82 and 8,400. Anywhere above this level here would be ideal on the daily chart. On the 4-hour chart, that would break the moving averages, but that'd be kind of an interesting level to be watching on the daily. And then from there, I really would like to see some sort of consolidation on the daily time frame, because if it continues to hold above that and consolidate, then that would really give it a good opportunity to set up a breakout over that 9,000 level with some good legs at that point. So that's what I'd be looking for here. It's just a lot harder to do after a move like this because it's a little bit more exhausted. Now this, granted, is nowhere near as a big of a move as some of these alts, but for Bitcoin it is. I mean, that's a nice move. It's a 30% move in just a couple of weeks, and going on almost 3 weeks now. But it's still a pretty big move for Bitcoin. It has had some pretty good pullbacks, which has helped reset it and let things keep marching higher. But like I said, I think it'd be nice if it paused a little bit. If it starts to really pull back and break down and start to lose that 8K level, then you really don't want to see it get much below 7,500 at that point. Things look like that was probably another lower high in the big scheme of things. And then I'd be betting on a new low at that point. Going into the halving. Bet on a new low going into the halving, and then a pre-run up before the halving, and then the breakouts, right? That's what we all want. Plus, it'd give me a nice chance to load up on some more Bitcoin before the halving. Right. Cool. Okay, guys. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for being here. I will see you all in the next one. Have a great weekend, everyone.